Welcome to the Marvel Snap Decks of the Week. This week we're talking about 7 unique deck lists, and what's interesting about this week is we recently had a balance patch drop, but unfortunately some of the usual suspects are still a little hot in the meta. It didn't shake things up quite as much as we'd have expected. However, we do have some emerging new decks that are starting to make waves, so let's actually get right into it. Now, what we're going to be talking about right off the bat is the Shuri list being still amongst the top. Now, we've seen some adjustments to the primary Shuri list. What we're seeing here is the inclusion of something like a Polaris or Maximus. This is basically to give yourself an additional good play on turn 3 in conjunction with the Cosmo. So if you don't actually pull Cosmo, you can use Polaris or Maximus. It also gives you a fallback in the event that you pull Cosmo, but you can't actually play Shuri on turn 4 because you don't have her. So you're able to play Maximus or Polaris into this kind of spot here on turn 4 onto the Cosmo, which negates their effect if that's not what you want, specifically with Maximus. We're actually seeing the tech with Captain Marvel being teched in instead of Vision more frequently than not. I actually tend to personally prefer Vision, but a lot of people are using Captain Marvel instead. And from there, honestly, it's straight up Shuri, right? You're still doing, you could literally skip every single turn, go Shuri, Red Skull Taskmaster, and you're still probably fine. That's what's kind of crazy about this deck list, but ultimately Shuri is still a major component of the current meta. Of all the decks impacted by the patch changes, nothing was impacted more than Thanos, while still being ultimately pretty damn reliable. The change to Quinjet, which basically makes so that the cards have a minimum 1 cost, so you can't get your stones for 0, for instance, does have an immense impact on Thanos. Now, there are a ton of different Thanos lists out there. Now, for this meta report, I didn't want to include any of the extremely experimental ones because I know that from past feedback, you guys don't want that. So ultimately, I know that you guys, you have these kind of core building blocks. The major thing is that people are subbing out Quinjet for straight up armor, honestly, to protect from the Shang-Chi's, which again are in almost half the games of Marvel Snap, and you still have a pretty workable list. It's not as punishing as the 0 kind of cost stones in the Lockjaw was, but it's still a very prominent list. With just the inclusion of armor, you're looking at a list that still performs, and I think it's really kind of impressing people with how good Thanos is, because once again, you got Thanos, but you got these stones that just do way too much, and still intact is the turn 3 time stone into a turn 4 leech. It's worth noting that turn 3 time stone is so valuable because you can play Blue Marvel if you suspect they don't have Killmonger. Arrow's still being played in the list, by the way, mainly because it is a good counterplay against Galactus, and quite frankly, we don't have an excellent replacement for it yet, although I do think Vision can go in for Arrow at times, because if Vision gets pulled out of the Lockjaw, you can pull it out, play another stone in, so Arrow can be replaced with Vision if you so wish. Ultimately, it's still like a really good deck. Like, Thanos is still top of the meta, it's still getting cubes, it'll still take you to infinite, and it wasn't quite as impacted as people might have expected. All right, don't shoot the messenger here. I know there's a lot of people that are going to hate what I have to say here, but Galactus is legitimately back in the meta, and it's always been kind of like a good card, and it's always been hovering around being meta prominent, and with the nerf to Arrow, which got absolutely dismantled, it did get additional power, went from 5/7 to 5/8, but like its ability drawing only the last enemy card played to a specific location is a huge downgrade. Now, you're thinking correctly, Alex, that still counters Galactus. I don't see how that counters Galactus. If you wave and I arrow, it still does the same thing. Yes, it does. But how often did you have Arrow in your deck just because it was like the best card in the game? It was the best 5-drop in the game. So by default, myself and every other person on the planet was basically saying you should just have Arrow in your deck list because it just is good. Like, you just play Arrow and you win the game. So Arrow is being used like across all decks. But guess what? Now Arrow's being subbed out of most decks, and that gives Galactus free reign. So Galactus is actually on the up and up. Now, with regards to like experimenting with Galactus, I do think that this is like the best deck to kind of get you started. So if you just bought Galactus with your tokens because you know he's kind of on the up and up, this is kind of what you want to do. You do have the Chavez, which is key because on turn 6 you want to have a consistent play with Galactus. If you don't have the Null, for instance, Yondu Null is a great combination. Generally speaking, what you have here is you have Electro turn 3, and then on turn 4 you're going to Dr. Octopus a lane and pull all their valuable units. If not, you can Hobgoblin into the lane you intend to Galactus, and then what you do is on the next turn you actually Galactus, which is turn 5. On turn 6 you have Chavez guaranteed, or you have the Null, which obviously is going to take advantage of everything that was destroyed by Dr. Octopus. You have the Cloak that allows you to clear out like squirrels and stuff like that might have been thrown all over your location from like Central Park, and obviously you have an additional ramp option in Psylocke. So this is kind of like the tried, tested, and true Galactus ramp list. So if you are experimenting with Galactus, this is the one to try. All right, so moving on to the next deck, and it's actually one of my favorite favorite of the current patch. This is one that I've been playing a ton of, and I really like it. This is Serahawk Control, and you got a lot of things working for you here. You do have the control against Thanos with the Killmonger into the Nova, which is great. You have the Darkhawk package. This is missing Korg. Korg can be subbed in if you wish. What I will say, though, is you have the control of Scarlet Witch. You obviously have the Sarah turn 5 for the Miracle turn 6. You have the reach of Mr. Fantastic for the priority, which is great. You have Shang-Chi. You have Enchantress, which is great as well. Sentinel Lizard. Like, this is just a great deck, right? This is a great card deck. What I've been actually doing as well is I've been actually taking out Enchantress and adding Absorbing Man. That gives me the additional opportunity to play more rock slides, which kind of is pretty cool. I do like Absorbing Man in this list. Ultimately, I think this deck list is really good. It's one of those decks that like provides you with a lot of utility. It gives you a lot of answers. You never really feel out of any particular game. Like, every game feels like compatible. You always feel like you're in it. And the result is a deck that I think is like kind of on the up and up. It's emerging. And I think that as we continue to have the meta shape up, you're going to see additional text being added to this, which keeps it relevant for the foreseeable future. The next deck is a definite up-and-comer in Doomwave, and we're going to talk about the Doom and Wave combination in just a moment here, but the main thing here is that it's all about maintaining priority. You have something like Iceman, which is honestly just a disruptive card for your opponent, but most importantly, you have 0 Titania, you have 0 Lizard, you have 0 Maximus, you have so many 0 hits. It's just a great card, and remember, 0 is a 1/3 itself. You have Lizard, which is a great priority card. Scorpion, which disrupts the opponent hand quite a bit. Polaris Maximus, just great value from the 3 position. Shang-Chi, the best card in the game in my opinion. And then here's the key thing. It's the last 3 cards that are really important that make this combination what it is. You have Arrow, which everyone's like, Alex, Arrow sucks now. What are you doing? But listen to me for a sec. You have Doctor Doom, and you have She-Hulk. Here's what you do. You play Wave on turn 5. You conserve the 2 energy, okay? And that gives you the 2-cost She-Hulk. That's consistent. And then what you do is you have 2 options. You can play Doctor Doom, which spreads 15 power across the board, in conjunction with your She-Hulk. Insane, right? Or what you do is you play She-Hulk in conjunction with Arrow. Arrow in this case is actually really good. Why? Because with Wave, they can only generally play 1 card unless they've held their own, She-Hulk, which is unlikely for the most part. They've only played 1 card, which means it's like the old Arrow again. So Wave in conjunction with Arrow produces the same effect as the traditional not nerfed Arrow, except you get an extra 1 power on the 5/8 Arrow here. So that's why this deck does so much work, because Arrow got nerfed, but it's still the same effect with Wave because they're generally only playing 1 card, and you can attack all the lanes with Doctor Doom or a specific lane with Arrow by kind of pulling them into like a lane you want to lose and allowing you to She-Hulk another one to get the dub. Regardless, I do think this deck list is a really good option and one that is rising up the current meta. For you cool 3 gamers out there, I know I've got a list for you that I think that you're going to enjoy, and that is Sandman Ramp. I think the Sandman Ramp is actually kind of really re-emerging in the meta, and I might actually expect to see it in future meta reports in like just the top higher tiers with pool 4 and 5 cards as well, because I think this is going to be really emerging fast, and I think that you're in a good spot if you're in pool 3 and you have the core components of this deck list here, because I think it's in a good spot, and I think that the Sandman is super disruptive in the current meta. The one thing that could be added is you could actually get rid of someone like Captain Marvel, and you can add Shang-Chi if you wish to get additional tech against Shuri. It kind of struggles against Shuri a little bit, although remember, the new Arrow is actually still good in conjunction with Wave, because, well, they only get to play 1 card. And guess what? With Sandman, they're only playing 1 card. So if you're in an advantageous position thanks to Doctor Doom, Odin, or whatever, your Arrow at the end of the game on turn 6 actually has the same impact as the traditional Wave because they're only able to play 1 card. That's what Sandman does. And so it basically forces them into a specific location, which gives you some counterplay against the Shuris. But ultimately, I do think this deck list is very strong. It's one that is a very straightforward play pattern as well. It's more or less consistent with the inclusion of Electro and Wave as well. And again, if you add Shang-Chi, you get an additional 4-drop, but like you're not going to be playing it on turn 4. That's the one thing about this list. You add Shang-Chi, you ramped into it with Sandman. It feels pretty awful to play, but against Shuri, especially with the Taskmaster change, not allowing Taskmaster to pull from the graveyard, it might be just what helps you win the game. I've been hearing from a lot of Pool 2 players that you're basically encountering a lot of Thanos and Shuri lists because of the state of the current meta, and perhaps you guys are just good at the game and you're gaining MMR pretty fast. And so this Dino Control list gives you a lot of answers to what you're seeing here. It's light on the top, does not have a 6-drop. What it gives you is the opportunity to have a Killmonger to answer against the Zoo you might see from Pool 1 and 2, but also against the Thanos list as well, with the Nova to give you some extra value as well. well. You get the kind of the value of Sentinel, the replication of Moon Girl to potentially give you a turn 5 and 6 Devil Dinosaur play with a pretty full hand. You have the control and like the mind games of Vision, which can be extremely valuable. You have the location correction of Storm, and ultimately you have the Enchantress, and if you want, you can actually sub in Shang-Chi. But remember, Enchantress actually works pretty well in the current meta against like Devil Dinosaurs yourself, right? Like when you're against Devil Dinosaurs on your own, it'll actually cut through the armors, whereas armor will protect from Shang-Chi, but not from Enchantress. So just bear that in mind. It's pretty interesting. Of course, it can impact your own Devil Dinosaurs, so be very mindful of that. But if there's armors and you're against a lot of Devil Dinosaurs, Enchantress is often a better choice versus Shang-Chi. However, if you are playing against a lot of Shuri-based lists as you gain MMR, you're going to want to probably sell out the Enchantress for a Shang-Chi of your own. Regardless, guys, we've got another video for you down below. Thank you so much for all your support. Press the like button and everything you do to support my content. I really appreciate it, guys. I love you, and we'll see you in the next Marvel Snap video.